So what I'd like to do now, we've had a range of comments in the chat that have come through to us, which raise some pertinent issues and concepts. And if it's okay, I'd like to pose the questions. We've got Anna and Amy from the University of Plymouth, and then we've got Maria from Ulster. So if it's okay, I'd like to open the floor to some questions. I'll give Maria a minute to have a breath after her presentation. So I will start with Anna and Amy. Anna or Amy, how did you recognise the differing leadership styles of your peers, and how did you flex your leadership style to work with them and meet the needs of them?
Thank you. Carry on. So I think when you go through this course, you actually notice that there are leadership styles all around us, and actually it's been quite interesting to see how those different leadership styles actually get what they want from patients, at what they want from their team around them as well, and actually what's really effective and what's not so effective. And actually, for me, having that compassionate leadership style was really important. And actually, it's been quite interesting to learn about that as a concept, and then being able to practice it and then understand why I am the way I am. And yes, I think interesting that some of those leadership styles, actually somebody, I think Maria talked about it, somebody that came to me who I really respected and said, I'm faced with this situation, what would you do? And actually my approach had been the complete opposite to his approach to a situation. And actually he came back to me 2 months later and said, I used your approach and it really worked. So it was amazing for me to think, actually I was able to speak to somebody that I really respected about a leadership style that I'd adopted, and it worked for him. And it was really, it was positive. So I guess showing it and using it.
And I think it's recognising that everyone has their own styles, and it's important to have the ability to adapt them in the different situations, and identify aspects of your own leadership styles that might need tweaking depending on what you're doing. I find that before I was in quite a different role before starting the ACP pathway, and so my leadership style was focused, had a different aim at the end of it, whereas now the leadership styles is much more to do with service development and improving the clinical care that we give the patients. So actually I've had to adapt, and by observing those of the styles of the peers around me, it's easy to be able to pick out what I want to emulate as a leader.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. I'm going to pose a question to Maria now. I'm not sure who this is from, but it's our first question. How did you manage the imposter syndrome that you mentioned? How did you manage it and that you experienced during your training?
Do you know, I think I still have a little bit of imposter syndrome, to be fair. I don't know that it ever goes away. When I first started, though, I just thought I can't shy away into the corner, and I need to look like I'm competent to be there in the first place. So I'd earned my place. I had to interview. I had to work hard to actually get on the course first. So I thought, no, I have a right to be here, and I'm not going to be that imposter. And do you know what? I put my heart and soul into that course, and I absolutely loved it, and I would do it all over again. Without a doubt. It was tough, but so good. But I think when you start to get that feedback, like Anna said, once you start to get feedback from other people, it dissolves the imposter syndrome a little bit, because you feel, I actually know that, it's like, oh, a wee light bulb's gone off. You didn't think you knew much, but actually you knew more than what you thought. And I think that helps, just being absorbed within teams and putting yourself out there. So it might be a wee bit, where you're like, oh gosh, I actually don't want to answer that question. I'm not sure of myself. But actually sometimes just putting yourself out there, just taking that little risk is really, really good for helping that imposter syndrome.
Super. Great answer. Thanks ever so much, Maria. And now I'm going to go back to Anna. And this is a question from Stacey. What has been your biggest leadership challenge during your training, and how did you navigate that?
I think for me it was coming in to a brand new role. So my role was working within oncology. I was acute oncology and palliative care, and I had been a manager of a small team, and I'd set that service up, and that was all good. And then I then had to come into a very different team, so multi-professional, but very GP heavy, and actually then having to, so if I'm very honest, it was the difference between going to them for education and being a very much subordinate of, please tell me all you know, and then the next minute saying, so we need to talk about leave, and actually, so the management side of the team, but also saying to them, I appreciate you're working with us on 1 or 2 sessions a week, but actually we need to look to the future. We need to look at where we're going. We need to look at all of these new bits. There were some new advances that were coming in, and NHS England had said to us, are you in a position to take on this trial and to work with this new technology? And actually I had to work really hard as a trainee ACP, so as their junior, to then bring them on board and say, actually, would you mind working with us? And actually, let's go in the same direction to see if we can make this work for patients. So it was very much not starting my training within a team that I'd already worked in. It was a new team, multi-professional, and people that I had to 1 minute lead the service direction, but on the other hand, I also had to ask them for all of their knowledge and to share that with me. So it's been an interesting dynamic, and talking about it has helped us overcome it, and it hasn't been a big problem, but it was certainly a challenge.
Yeah, super. Interesting challenges to overcome indeed. So now, Amy, a question for you. This is from Gwen, how have you used your peers as support, and not only for developing your leadership skills?
I think it's been quite tricky where I am, because I was the first senior nurse to be put onto the ACP pathway in the acute paediatric department that I'm in. So it's been a learning curve for everybody about how it was going to work and what support I was going to need. And from the medical team, they've never had a trainee ACP to lead, to support through. So it's been a bit of a trial and error from both me and my peers. But I think just having this open communication with them, identifying actually what my learning needs were, and how the medical team and the nursing teams can support that. It's just, having that open communication and recognizing that every member of the team has a lot to bring, basically, to hopefully develop an ACP service where I am. But it's an ongoing thing, and I think it's always going to be an ongoing dynamic to be able to learn from each other, really.
Fab. Lovely. Thank you very much. And now a question for Maria, from Maria. How did the leadership model that you talked about, how did that change your views or your perspective on compassionate leadership, drawing upon your emotional intelligence? Good question.
Oh, gosh. I think that working within a team, and now that I'm working within, district nursing teams, and I'm working within 50 teams, there's just me working across that many. I find it difficult to sort of hone in on one thing, but what I've definitely found is if the patient is at the center of the circle at all time, they are the core of the apple, and it's about empowering the nurses and the healthcare assistants and the district nurse in the teams, empowering them with knowledge and that sort of helping them along with a bit of resilience that, you know, times are tough, you know, working out there is not easy. It's not the go in and have a cup of tea job that people think district nursing is. It's very pressured. Time is very short. So I think it's proving to staff that they can do it and they can actually do a really, really good job that's not just task focused for the patient, that they are delivering that holistic care. And I think I'm using my emotional intelligence to help kind of nurture and empower them with their own resilience, that they can get through it, and using sort of situational leadership styles. So one team might be very different than the other because one team's very rural, one team's very urban. So it really is just dependent on that. You know, I think the compassionate leadership is very much so for your staff as well as the patient themselves. So I think what you reflect as a role model onto your peers and your colleagues and other staff is really instrumental in delivering safe patient care. I think having that sort of neighbourhood district nursing model that we would use in parts of Northern Ireland helps us balance that. There's no hierarchy within the leadership. We are just a flat sort of leadership model, so nobody's above anyone else. We're all working towards the same goal, and I think that's what's important.
Super, lovely. Thank you very much. And I'm going to fire a question to Amy and Anna. Maybe one of you gets a chance to think about your answer. How do you think that universities or HEIs should be delivering leadership training as a standalone module or filtered continuously? What are your thoughts on how leadership could be or should be implemented throughout a course such as the one you've just done?
Interestingly, we were talking about this earlier, and kind of so that, you know, leadership isn't there's not a standalone module. It is interwoven throughout a lot of the modules that kind of we ended up doing, and we talked about whether actually there is a role to have an independent kind of leadership module. I think for me it would be useful to perhaps kind of focus on the kind of the leadership and the skills that that might be required to kind of aid the transition from like a trainee ACP into a qualified ACP. So not just kind of focusing on the methodology kind of around the different leadership styles, but actually how you can put that into practice to help kind of lead the teams and help improve kind of the service delivery, and to kind of maybe help with the imposter syndrome that kind of Maria was talking about, and kind of I agree, I think is there on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I think there is something to be said about perhaps having more focus on some leadership throughout the ACP course.
I agree, and I think the bit that we talked about was because we were on the apprenticeship, we actually had meetings as a tripartite meeting, and actually we wondered whether a little bit more could be made of those meetings about that adjustment into that sort of, you will be seen and recognised and expected to be that senior leadership within the trust now, but actually we also had our heads in books and we're thinking we're students and actually we're trying to learn and this is where we're at. I think leadership is really well, certainly for our course, was well interwoven, as Amy said, but I do think a little bit more needs to be made of it. And I think there was a situation just in the last week actually in our trust where there was some nurses on the ward who were really trying to expedite a discharge from a patient, and actually one of my colleagues who's an ACP was able to come in and to go straight to a very senior level of nursing management within the trust, and actually she was able to articulate and support the leadership of that discharge because of the skills she had to manage that situation. And actually I think sometimes we need to remember that we are able to use the skills that we aren't necessarily taught in a didactic fashion actually it's all the stuff you pick up in through doing the course and learning, that actually we need to recognise that those are leadership skills, those are leadership styles, and that one leadership style doesn't have to define you. You can switch in and out of them depending on the situation. So I think if you're doing the apprenticeship, personally, I wondered whether there could be a little bit more within the tripartite, within those views, because that's about how the universe, or how it works within the workplace, and that interface between the two. And I wondered whether that would be a good opportunity to look at those, and then look at what your style is coming out as you exit the pathway.
Brilliant. Yeah, some really good insights there. I've made a little note. I'm going to move on now to a question for Maria. This is from Kate. How do you think... oh no, sorry, that wasn't the one I was going to read. Sorry. How do you think the new career pathway will impact the opportunities for advanced practice in Northern Ireland?
So the career pathway is specifically for district nursing. At the moment, there are four AMPs in district nursing within Northern Ireland. So that's obviously not enough. We had, beforehand, really, there was the band 3s, the band 5s, and then it was a jump to a band 7, which is very scary. And I think that, there was no band 6 in between. And, people, to get to the band 7, you needed your SPQ, and people didn't want to do that. So this career pathway has allowed for that sort of in-between stage that you don't have to have a recognised qualification for. With regards to advanced practice, I think absolutely. I think it's very clear and articulated as to how you can progress your career within district nursing. And I think that's very appealing. We're seeing big increases of newly qualified nurses coming into district nursing, which is fantastic. They've recognised now throughout their pre-reg training that actually district nursing is a lot more complex than what it used to be. You need an awful lot of skills. I actually found that the skill set was higher and more complex than when I was doing my placements on the ward. You are autonomous, you are, as an AMP, you're working autonomously in someone's home, and you can't just turn around and ask somebody for, what do you think of that? There's nobody there. So it's creating that sort of pathway to that experience then and confidence of being an AMP. So I think it's great, and they have the career pathway all the way up to the consultant district nurse, which is fantastic. And that role has been instrumental in a lot of discharging of complex cases from hospital, which wouldn't necessarily have happened as rapidly as what it did. It's helping to educate, even the AMP role, helping to educate district nursing teams, which has been really well received as well, because it's a district nurse teaching district nurses, whereas it's not sort of a generic teaching method, where you're mixed in maybe with hospital staff, which can have its benefits as well, because mixing experiences is good. But I definitely think the career pathway is attracting a lot more people into district nursing, which I think is fantastic. I hope that's answered. I'm not sure if that's answered the question.
Yeah. No, it's definitely. Super. Thank you ever so much. And then this is one last question for all of you in various guises. We just heard from our new Academy of Advanced Practice Research and the importance of research around the whole concept of advancing practice. And I'd just be interested in your thoughts on how we can combine leadership and the development of research skills in trainee and advanced practitioners. So that combination of leadership and the development of research skills. What do you think about that? How can we combine that?
I think that's difficult. I think from experience, from, you know, speaking with my colleagues on the course, a lot are just, they don't like research at all. And I think that's quite common within nursing, and it's getting that idea that it's too difficult and too arduous to do. I think whenever, you know, if you can get somebody and use your leadership skills to, you know, sort of get somebody to come up with their own idea, you know, as a trainee MP, you know, say, well, look, what interests you the most? What do you think's wrong with that area? And how do you think you can actually make that better? You know, and they coming up with their own ideas and they're getting excited about it, you know, and then really, you know, I was a wee bit cautious about research and I absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I got a lot out of it. And I'm taking that forward throughout my new post. So I've carried it forward from a trainee into my job because I want to make the care better for people out there and for like caregivers and families. So I think, yeah, it's a tricky one because research is one of those taboo subjects, but it is really needed. And I think nurses need to lead into research because it's so heavily, you know, in years gone by, it's been so heavily done by medical staff, and other professions seem very supported to do research. So I think we need the senior leadership in our organisations to support us to do it as well. Sorry, I'll let you speak.
Yeah, thank you, Maria.
I agree with it completely, and I think it's from kind of the medical team. It's embedded in their training all the way through is to kind of undertake kind of audits or research and QI projects on the ward. Whereas I think from my experience, it's not something that's really kind of pushed or encouraged or supported from a nursing point of view. And I think that makes that general awareness of what it entails probably quite scary for a lot of people, whereas actually it's about breaking it down into kind of smaller manageable kind of pieces, and it's not this massive kind of huge bit of research that's going to take hours and lots of audit and data collection and things. You know, that there are smaller projects that can be kind of undertaken to improve the kind of the service that we provide to patients, and it's just breaking down those barriers so that it makes it more manageable, and as you said, something that they're really interested in and actually can see a really clear link between the research and things that they're doing to actually improving patient care. And so that it's those making those little wins, I think, really, and just starting small and building up.
I think moving on from that, actually, when I sat down and I vividly remember texting my friend during the research module, and I was like, I don't even know how to pronounce that word. So from my perspective, going into the research module, actually, that was really intimidating. Whereas when I look back in my nursing, actually, practice was changing around us all of the time, but actually, the leadership was not telling us, or the management of our small teams were not saying, hey, look at this, this is why we're now going to be doing mouth care in this way. This is why we're going to be doing it. So actually, when I went into this module, I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to go through reams and reams of evidence to be able to try and pull out themes, and oh my goodness, I don't even know what that means. So I think it's about keeping things really basic and actually championing that you can do an audit of your own practice of something, as you were saying, that you're really interested in. Let that grab you and actually look at what other research is out there and then change your practice because of what you found out. It's really exciting.
Fabulous. Lovely. And that in itself is leadership, isn't it? Taking those ideas forward so that research ideas can be manageable. That's the important thing. Super. So we have addressed all of the questions, and I would like to draw this to a close now, unless you have anything you would like to add. No? Super. Well, thank you all very, very much for your time. And also thank you to Emily, who couldn't be with us live because of her night shifts, but she presented that video recording for us. So thank you to you all. I shall leave you to your afternoons. And thank you for your contribution.